Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, and welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. My name is Cody Sizemore, and I'm joined here by my lovely co-host, Maria Casillas. And today we are going to be talking about something that I feel is really important and probably oftentimes gets overlooked or even just slips through the cracks for a lot of coaches here. And it's a huge missed opportunity. So we're going to get into that. But first, before we do that, want to do a few things and just kind of talk to you guys about a couple things. First and foremost, if this is your first time listening to the show, we just appreciate you being here. Hopefully you get some value from this episode. And if you do and you want to follow it, subscribe to the show, leave a rating, share the show, whatever you guys want to do. And also, if you have been listening to the show for a long time, in fact, you've been listening to the show basically every week since we release episodes once a week, you would be someone that we call an every weeker, which we really do appreciate you, continuing to show support to us, and getting value from the show too. You're the ones who really help us keep going, and we really do appreciate that. And then lastly, we have a Facebook group that is free to join, and you can get a ton of value from. So that Facebook group is called The Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. And it's a great place to connect with us, ask questions. We've even, recently done a few podcast episodes from people who have asked questions within that group. So it's a really good resource for you to kind of just like expand off of the next episode, tell us what you want to learn about, and then, obviously connect with us as well as the other coaches in the group as well. So with all that being said, I'm going to bring in Maria. Maria, how you feeling today?
I'm good. Thank you. Glad to be here with you today.
Good. Yeah, we had long story short, we had a little bit of technical issues, but it's all good. It's all good. We're here now. So
the long story short is me.
Right.
I love how nice you try to put it, but
it's okay.
I'm good. We're back and ready to roll. So
yeah. Cool. Well, I think that we just jump straight into it today.
Yeah.
You cool with that? Okay.
I'm absolutely cool with that.
So I'm going to actually bring this topic forward by asking you a question.
Okay.
And the question would be this. Have you ever had an experience with working with the client to where maybe you talked to them the first time and they weren't ready to step into coaching quite yet, but then they were later on?
Of course.
Okay. So in your experience, can you give me just like a couple ideas of like what that's kind of looked like for you in the past, what that experience was?
Sure. A lot of times it is pre-contemplation, contemplation that like we've talked here before.
Yep.
That's right. They are just not in a spot where they're ready yet. And so oftentimes what that looks like for me is trying to figure out just on a basic level which stage they're in, and then be able to ask enough questions to help them recognize kind of what stage they're in without telling them what stage they're in, so that we can then transition them to another stage. So for example, if somebody's, pre-contemplative or contemplating, then it's just that they don't really feel the impact yet of some of their choices, or they feel the impact, but they haven't yet made the connection between their choices and the pain that they're feeling. Does that make sense? And so just sometimes asking leading questions and open questions that help them to kind of make that connection. And then sometimes they'll go for, 2 weeks before they kind of make that connection and call back. And sometimes it could be months when they kind of live life a little bit more. They continue to make those choices. The consequences of those decisions became more and more evident for them. And then they finally said, all right, enough's enough. And I really need to try to tackle this. And they'll come back much later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you're talking about is more so like mentally or emotionally ready. Right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. And that's a really good indication, because there are some people who are financially ready to do it, but not mentally or emotionally. I don't know if you've had this experience, but sometimes you'll talk to people on a consultation and I don't know if it's like a defense mechanism. Sometimes I think it might be just their personality, but they schedule a call with you because they want help, and then you get on the call with them, and they almost give this kind of presentation that like what they're doing is working. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and like they don't need the help, and it's like, well, why did you actually book this call if everything's working, kind of thing, right? So that's one that's really, really common. But even there's some people who maybe aren't ready for coaching because maybe they're mentally and emotionally ready, but their finances are in a really tough spot, right? Have you ever came across that experience too?
I have. I mean, we're in financial coaching, so of course that yes. And so sometimes it's easy to help them find your fee in their mess, if you will. But sometimes it really is just so tight that you're like, yeah, it really is not going to be in your best interest to do this quite yet.
Right.
And then you help them to work that in, but instead of working it in where they're able to grab it immediately from their cash flow, it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, they're creating a sinking fund to be able to hire you later on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, because you've gone through this, I've gone through this. I'm sure that, anyone has had any sort of consultation listening to this has probably gone through something like this as well. And I feel like if we meet with someone who's not ready for coaching, whether it be on the mental and emotional side or whether it be on the financial side, oftentimes we have that consultation, we talk to them, we maybe give them a couple insights for them to kind of like take and run with themselves and kind of see how things go. And then we just kind of move on. The intention, we tell them, let's keep in touch. But then we get busy with life, we get busy with family, we get busy with our other clients, and we usually just never actually keep in touch the way we say we're going to, right? And to me, that is a huge, huge missed opportunity. Huge missed opportunity. So I wanted to talk about this today because I wanted to share with you just one case study in my business that kind of showcases like the importance of actually following up and actually helping these people get to the place to where they can not only A, afford your coaching, but also B, by doing the coaching, they're going to see immense progress as well.
Awesome.
So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to unpack that case study.
That'll be great.
Okay, cool. So there is an individual I have been talking to for a long time. Had my initial call with him probably about 2 years ago. And mentally and emotionally, he was ready. He really wanted the help. But his finances were really, really tough. Like really tough, right? So I basically told him, I'm like, hey man, I know that you want the help and I'm happy to help you. But as far as stepping into this coaching program, I don't think that you're financially ready for that quite yet. I think it's going to be more of a hindrance on you than it's actually going to help you with where things are at currently. However, what I can do is I can help you get there and I can help you with your situation now. And as it develops, we can then talk more about that down the road. So that's what we did, talk to him about, different employment options, side hustle options, some things to do with his current existing bills that could either cut down expenses or maybe even kind of like reworking some of his debts to have lower payments or something like that. And we just kind of like touched base probably once every 2 months. And, it wasn't the first time that we talked that he moved forward with coaching eventually. It wasn't the second time. It wasn't the third time. It wasn't the fourth time. It was the fifth time. So it took about 10 months for him to actually like get things into a good enough place to where he could afford my services and also make some progress. So it's a 10-month long ramp up period.
Yeah, it's a long game.
Before I go any further, I mean, like, what's your reaction to that?
Well, it's one of not surprise mostly because when you started talking about this, I'm like, it's going to be a while. But also, it's one of impression, like I'm impressed by you because you had that persistence and that patience that had to have come along with that. And I just think a lot of times people they don't have that. If they have the patience and they have the persistence, they sometimes they lack the ability to recognize that it's not about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's they start to take things personally. Like, well, I've reached out to this person and, they're still not doing anything. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not them. And so maybe it's pride. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's something egotistically there that just says, nope, I got to stop. And so I think that would be my initial reaction to you is that, kudos to you for being able to continue through that.
It could even just be, hey, am I wasting my time?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because you don't know what is on the other side. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Which I've definitely felt like that in the past before. But I will say this. The phrase that you said, it was something along the lines of, it's not about you, it's about them. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of thinking that you're wasting your time is literally making it about you.
Yeah.
And not them. Right? So that right there is like a huge indication that if you've ever felt that way, you should check yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Because in these types of scenarios, the kind of mindset that I have behind it is I kind of like declare, I'm like, this person's going to be a client of mine. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So I'm going to continue to help nurture them so that they can become a client of mine. And I'm going to continue to reach out. I'm going to continue to check in. I'm going to continue to communicate with them. And if sometimes they don't respond, because sometimes they don't, right?
Right.
That's okay. You continue to reach out. And my rule of thumb is until they tell me, hey, dude, stop contacting me, then I'm going to keep contacting them. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is because, especially with this topic, right? It's a very personal topic. It's very vulnerable. To some people, it can even be a taboo topic, right? So sometimes, like, they will avoid it, but simply you just continuing to be there and continuing to want to support them. Sometimes they have those walls built up, but every time that you reach out and you just remind them, hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here. Those walls start to lower and lower and lower and lower until finally they say, okay, I'm open to talking with you. And that's all you really need is just them being open to talking with you,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually going through this right now with somebody. Before I tell you what I'm doing, though, I'm curious to know when you reach out, what method are you typically using for that?
Whatever method they initiated the conversation with. So, if it was someone that I connected with through Facebook, then I would do Facebook. If someone reached out to me email, I would do email. If someone, did phone, I would do phone. Now, what I will say is that sometimes with things like Facebook or email, if, you reach out to them 4 or 5 times in a row and they still haven't responded, then it might make sense to switch to a phone.
Something else.
Right? Whether it be text or call kind of thing. Just because it's a little bit more direct, and if you're kind of reaching that point where it's like, are they just completely ghosting me, or is just a phone a little bit more of a direct line of communication? Yeah. I would switch to phone at that point. But generally speaking, whatever sort of avenue the conversation was initiated in.
I think that's really wise advice. And when you go to the phone, typically, well, I don't know, I'm asking, do you do a lot of phone calls with this? Like this guy, was it a lot of phone calls or was it more written communication?
Yeah, the check-ins were mostly text.
Okay.
And then when we felt like we needed to, hop on a phone call, we would. So, I would reach out to him probably like once a month via text, and then we'd hop on the phone on average about once every 2 months kind of thing. Okay. And not for very long, like 20, 30 minutes.
Right.
Just to like check in and, get a little bit more of a game plan, next steps, that kinds of stuff. So
yeah. Cool. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing with this individual. But the one thing I will say is that if there's something that's going on that is of value to that person, that's another really good reason to reach out. I'm using quotes over here. I think so. For this example, I just recently did a workshop, and I did it for a completely different group of people. But during that workshop, a lot of the stuff that I know this particular client is going through was coming up. And so as soon as I got done with that, I actually touched base with this individual because they were ready. And then financial things is exactly what got in the way. And it was just a text message just saying, I just did this workshop and your family came to mind. And I let her know that it was free and offered to let her, be invited to the next one. Now she has not responded to that, and that's okay. It's like you said, sometimes they just need to let it sit there. But I just wanted to throw that in because if there's other things you're doing already that would be valuable for your clients, that's a really good opportunity for you to invite them in so that you're not always just wasting your time by doing extra. You're inviting them into what is already taking place. So
really good point. Anytime that you have something going on that's not like, extra work, or you have a resource of a lead magnet that you've already created, but any time in this whole nurturing process that you can give them more value that they didn't ask for, it's going to help in the long run.
Yeah, it'll help both of you. It'll help them, but it'll also help you to manage that time a little bit easier.
Correct. Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So going back to this case study, 10-month lead up. Eventually he did end up joining the program. And my program is a 6-month one, at least one of them, the one that he joined. And we went through that 6 months. He got way better with his money, saw a lot of progress, paid down a lot of debt, felt very confident with things. His relationship with money improved. And then when the 6 months ended, and I asked him, I was like, hey, dude, like, do you want to continue with coaching? He said, absolutely. So now we've been working together for not 6 months, but 12 months and counting. And beyond that, not only has it just been, hey, I got the client and I was able to help him, but also it was, well, the initial term was 6 months, and now I'm working with him for double the amount of time. And on top of that, he's also referred me to new clients who have also started working with me as well. So I wanted to make this point, not only to discuss the things that we've already discussed up until this point, but also to kind of point out, like, if the work wasn't done to nurture and to be patient and to, help provide some sort of like hope or plan for this individual, if I didn't take the time to ensure that I continued to make it about him versus me, then on my end, I wouldn't have A, gotten him as a client, B, retained him as a client, and C, got those new clients from him, which D might also then in turn into them retaining as a client and them referring as more clients as well. And that's my big point here, is that we can't just look at these situations where we have these consultations and we see someone who's not ready financially, mentally, or emotionally, and then we just say, hey, let's keep in touch, and then we just forget about them because we're missing out on potentially thousands of dollars for our revenue and our families, but also B, and more importantly, we're missing out on actually making an impact on people's lives. And when I say people's, I'm not just talking about them. I'm talking about them and potentially some of their family or their friends as well.
Yep.
And that's the main reason why I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, I think that's really good. In fact, it reminds me of something that I saw in our Facebook group. And I pulled it up just because I wanted to honor the person who wrote it. So Dave Gibbs actually wrote this, and he's talking about how relationships are built over time. And one of the things he said was connections, referrals. Okay, so they won't become your best friends in just one 30-minute conversation while you're already thinking about the next person to meet. And that, what you just said really sums up that, because you just mentioned, like, we're trying to, it's like, okay, you've heard that phrase. It's in sales where it's like, when you hear no, you're like, so what, who's next? Right. There's a longer bit of it. I'm not remembering all of it, but that's the crux of it. So what, who's next? And what Dave is saying here, what you're saying is, it's actually important. Don't just worry about who's next. Focus on the person who's in front of you right now, so that you can serve that person and serve them well. And then continue to go with the person who's next, but continue to nurture the relationship with the person now, even later. So you can nurture more than one relationship at a time. And it seems like that's what you're trying to say as well. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely very wise, and it's a good way to be a good person. It's not just to be a good business owner. It's like, how do you be a decent person to the people, the individuals who are sitting in front of us? Because if we really realize that these are people, not just dollar signs, we're going to treat them differently.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of the core of the heart of what it takes to be a good coach.
Yeah.
Like when you're spending time with someone, like no one else matters. It's about them, and even if it's not a yes right away, that doesn't mean that it's a no. It just means it's not right now kind of thing, So my biggest suggestion to anyone who's listening to this, who feels a little bit called out because they're like, wow, this is me. I've told people let's keep in touch and I haven't, right? My biggest suggestion to you is to find a system that helps you keep track of your leads. So we've talked about this in the past on the show before. If you were to do like a search into the search bar on the show, you'll probably find something about Trello. That's the tool that I use to kind of keep my leads consistent, and so that I never really forget about anyone. But I would set up a system so that you don't forget, and then I would just continue to reach out until they tell you, hey, one of two things. One being, hey, stop reaching out to me. Or two, let's do it. And that way it just gives you closure either way, and don't give up on people. That's the big takeaway here.
Yeah, I think that's really, really great. Thank you so much for bringing this to the table, Cody. It's really neat when we see what's going on in our businesses match up with what's going on in our group. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it just means that they're pretty consistent, and this is, if it's happening with us, it's probably happening with them. And I'm really glad that we can share some real life stories of what's happening in our lives so that they, our listeners, can start applying some of this stuff. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. And again, if you haven't joined that Facebook group, definitely do. It's the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. And if you're looking for ways to just kind of get started with your coaching practice as well, maybe you're an aspiring financial coach, or you're someone who started it, but you're having trouble getting your first client or the next client, whatever it might be. We do have a self-paced course called Getting Started as a Financial Coach, and you can find info to that in the show notes. We have like a free webinar that you can watch to learn more about it, to see what it's all about and how it can benefit you. And if you see value in it, there's obviously a link that you can, invest yourself into that. So don't wait to get started as a financial coach, and hop into getting started as a financial coach. So with that being said, you guys enjoy your week. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.